Hello, Jimmy here. Today we are talking about something that I didn't actually know was a real thing, but let's talk about the cultural appropriation of chin stripes. So chin lines or chin stripes are part of a complex system of tattooing, which is obviously the modification of the skin, the body's skin, using inks and pigments, and it's practiced in an awful lot of cultures. There are lots of cultures worldwide that use tattooing as a form of cultural expression or as an element of their culture, and tattooing has been practiced for 10,000 years. It's very old. Otzi the Iceman has tattoos. We know that tattooing has been practiced continuously in various parts of the world for millennia. And we have no evidence whatsoever that Scandinavian Old Norse people were practicing tattooing. None. Zip. We have one source from the Viking Age, which is of course Ibn Fadlan's diary, if you like, his description of his journey north up the Volga, and he describes the Rus, and they are specifically the Rus, as being covered in tattoos, that they tattooed themselves. I think he says that they're tree-like tattoos. And it could be paint, actually. It could be tattoo, it could be paint. The wording of the original is ambiguous. So we have one flimsy, fairly dodgy in its accuracy and interpretation source that says that tattoos existed in the Viking Age in Old Norse culture. And it doesn't. It says it existed in Rus culture. Sorry, it's a distinct culture at this point. And I was recently told that there are people on something called a TikTok who are filming themselves singing along to the song I Am My Mother's Savage Daughter, which is a rad piece of music and is a very empowering piece of musical feminism, if you like. And it's a really cool song. And so I went and had a look through a young person's phone who had TikTok on their phone, because my phone will not support it, because I and it are old. Anyway, I had a look, and yeah, it turns out that people are mouthing along to this song whilst wearing what they describe as Viking makeup, and I was kind of horrified, because what they're doing is absolutely, it has no real link to the Viking Age. What they're doing is they are putting makeup on in a style reminiscent of, say, characters like Lagertha from The Vikings, the TV show, which, as we know, is a fantasy. The costuming, the makeup, the hair is nothing like what we have evidence for it being in the actual early medieval period in Northern Europe. When I saw some of these videos and I saw some of the comments on them and some of the feedback on them, several people accused these videos of cultural appropriation, of being appropriative of indigenous North American culture, of Maori culture, and of various other cultures across the world that use facial tattoos. And I had a little look around, and yeah, it's pretty bad. The ones that you see a lot of, where we have things like a solid block colour across the eyes, often applied with an airbrush. You have stripes from the eyes to the earlobes, spots going from the eyes to the ears. You'll have stripes or a stripe from the lips down the chin, sometimes extending under the chin. Those are particularly egregious, and you see a lot of others that have things like bind runes by the sides of the eyes coming down here. Regardless of the fact that bind runes aren't really a Viking Age thing particularly, see Jackson Crawford's videos for more information on how bind runes worked or didn't in the Viking Age. The use of things like the chin stripes and the stripes from the eyes to the ears in the way that it's done is really obviously appropriated from a number of indigenous tattooing traditions. So it is particularly obviously taken from some indigenous tattooing traditions. If you look a little bit deeper into this, you'll see that there are a number of active cultures in the world today who use tattooing, as I say at the start, as an important element of their culture and of their expression. And you have things like the tamoko of the Maori, and the Maori use tattooing in very, very specific ways. Those tattoos communicate very specific things about the person who has those tattoos. And in particular, stripes and elaborate designs extending from the lips down to the chin are a central feature of tamoko, of Maori tattooing, and it means something, and it has meant something for centuries. And this is a form of body modification that was made illegal for a long time. Generations of people were forbidden from doing this in many cultures. The Inuit, for example, were prevented from displaying tattoos. The kekinyit, the traditional form of tattooing, and there are some wonderful videos of people getting their first tattoo in this traditional way, and I'm going to link to a couple of articles in the description, but these were banned. They were banned for, I believe, over a century, and the fact that they are now there's a resurgence in this is really important to people of that culture. Yeah, the idea that people are just doing this without thinking on TikTok, it's kind of embarrassing. There's no evidence whatsoever that the Old Norse practiced this kind of tattooing, or that the Old Norse had a tattooing language. There are claims on the internet that Old Norse tattoos communicated things in the way that tamoko or kekinyit does, and there's no evidence of that whatsoever. And no depictions of people from the Viking Age, especially Old Norse people, suggest that those people are tattooed. There are no rune stones covered in pictures of people with swirly designs all over their skin, for example. And some people have argued things like the Roman description of Celtic peoples being tattooed. That is controversial. The only sources we have on that are fragmentary Roman descriptions, which are very often inaccurate. We don't know what their tattooing culture was, what the techniques were, whether they were tattooed or not. We don't know any of that. There's also an argument that this is just makeup. This isn't tattooing, and it's not meant to represent tattooing. It's just fun makeup. Okay, but it's very clearly taken from these traditions. And if it's not tattooing, and it's just meant to be makeup, I've also seen people describing it as warpaint. And warpaint, similarly to tattooing, is also still very much used as a mode of communication and as a cultural expression and as protection, as medicine in a number of cultures. And some of the ones that we see, like the stripes from the eyes and the solid bands across the eyes, very clearly inspired by, stolen from, indigenous face painting or body painting traditions. And in a number of, for example, Great Plains cultures, using face paint has very specific meanings. It can be used ceremonially, it can be used in combat, or as a recognition of having seen combat. It can be used as a recognition for veterans. The use of things like feathers in the hair, again, very specific honour granted only to specific people for having committed specific deeds. And it's kind of a shame to see people just thoughtlessly doing this kind of stuff at the end of the year 2023, when really we should know better. It's not difficult to Google, for example, face paint cultural appropriation. I did, and got a swathe of very well-written articles by people from these cultures basically saying, hey, please don't do this, it's still really important to us, and it was banned by colonizers for centuries. So, yeah. So I had a couple of people ask, is there any evidence for this? What links does this have to the Viking Age? And the answer is none. We have no evidence whatsoever that makeup like this was ever worn in the Viking Age. We don't have any evidence that war paint was used by the Old Norse. None at all. The evidence for Old Norse war paint is basically this guy from this TV show, and we don't have anything else. We have one source that describes people wearing black pigment around their eyes for beautification in Hedeby, in Haithabu, and that's it. And he specifically says that it was to beautify the eyes. It's literally just kohl, it's eyeliner, as far as we can tell. There's no evidence that they just had a great big black smear of paint across their eyes. But again, a large black strip across the eyes is very much something that is done in some living cultures, and has cultural significance, and it communicates meaning. So, you know, be sensitive. There's an appalling argument that is, well, if all of these primitive cultures do it, then surely the Old Norse as a primitive culture must have done something similar.
Hi, Editing Jimmy here. I forgot to mention there's a barbarianising element to this as well. And when I say that, I mean there is an element of portraying cultures as more barbaric or primitive. And that is something that has been done traditionally in media to the Vikings and the Old Norse. They're often shown as violent, poorly educated, illiterate people. And uncomfortably, that is also a label that has been put on many indigenous cultures that have then been systematically abused and their cultures suppressed and oppressed by colonizing influences. So when people kind of do this maths in their head and think, oh, well, all of these indigenous cultures do face tattoos, and then take that element and apply it to the Vikings as a primitive or barbaric culture, that is the barbarianization that is happening. And it is also terrible, inappropriate, and bad, and wholly inaccurate, because, of course, as we all know, the Old Norse were a complex, highly developed society and culture in their own right, and yeah, it's just inaccurate. Just be cool. Just be excellent to each other. Anyway, Editing Jimmy out. Back to a few hours ago, Jimmy. Should give him a name as well at some point.
We reject that utterly. That is an appalling argument based off incredibly bad anthropology. We do not do that. There are no primitive cultures, and the idea that you can take and cherry pick an element of culture from a current 21st century culture and apply it to a broadly publicly misunderstood 8th to 11th century culture is extremely erroneous and bad. Like, no, absolutely not. We've got zero evidence of that at all. So yeah, no, none of that stands up. You will see people wearing makeup like this at events. If you're a reenactor, if you're new to reenactment, you will see this being done at certain events. York Viking Festival is one of them. There will be people who just turn up in fanciful fantasy in costumes and will be wearing this kind of makeup. People of all genders. I mean, just, it will happen, but know that it's not a thing from the Viking Age. It is, as far as I can tell, just an ignorant cultural appropriation that seems to have gained some unfortunate traction on social media. Cultures where this is currently practiced, the tattooing and the use of tattooing in many cultures across the world is absolutely fascinating, and in some places it's done as a rite of passage specifically for women, which is really cool. The way it's done is really cool. Sometimes it involves the use of natural pigments and natural tattooing tools that are used in a way that's been used for centuries and centuries. It's absolutely fantastic. Sometimes it is done for medicine, it's done for protection. The same with the painting. Body and face painting can be used in ceremonies. It can be used as a cultural identifier. It can be used as a status marker, as a member of an elite cadre or as a specific role in a culture, which is amazing and wonderful. And I think a lot of the reason why Viking fans want to do it is because they feel jealous that there isn't anything like that, and because tattoos have become a part of neo-Viking, if you like, culture, and they feel jealous that they don't have that link to the past, and I understand that. Do you know how much I want there to be a Welsh cultural tattooing tradition? Do you know? Let me tell you, it is a lot. I wish that we had a really cool, important, culturally significant tradition of tattooing symbolism and meaning on ourselves, or that we had a tradition of painting things on ourselves that had that cultural significance in Wales, and we don't. There is, as far as we know, Brythonic tradition doesn't have a tattooing or a body modification element. And the as I mentioned, the Roman source on Celtic people doing it does not count. That is not my culture. That is an ancient culture. Modern Welsh culture is a very different beast. But yeah, I'm jealous that there are people out there who legitimately get to do amazing stuff with painting their faces and bodies and tattooing themselves for culturally significant and legitimately culturally significant reasons. I don't have that option, and I am a big enough man to say, well, there we go, that's fine. I will just appreciate that from a distance and be respectful of it. And obviously I can't stop you, I can't stop anybody from doing anything. I'm just a face on a screen. But I hope that if you were confused about this, or you were thinking of doing this but weren't sure if it was an appropriate thing for you to do, that this helps a little bit with providing some backstory. I hope the reading in the description is also interesting. I found it fascinating reading up about this. As I said, I was very unfamiliar with the subject before a few weeks ago. But yeah, the chin lines thing, not a Viking thing, and broadly accepted as cultural appropriation as far as I can tell, because it is practiced as a significant thing in many cultures, including the Inuit and the Maori. So be respectful, be cool. In the words of Bill and Ted, just be excellent to each other. Just be excellent to each other. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I really enjoyed researching this, so thank you very much to everybody who suggested I have a look into this. Do appreciate it. And yeah, if you, as ever, if you would like to support the channel financially, we have the Patreon link in the description, we have the Coffee link, and I appreciate every single one of you who has been encouraging me with recording podcast stuff and who has been joining the Patreon recently. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much to every single one of you. So, yeah, till the next time, Tan y tro nesa. Hwyl fawr, bye-bye. Big old King Arthur, right there. Big old King Arthur, right there. Right my boobs. Big old King Arthur. Merlin on the back. Wizard. Right on the back there. Wizard Merlin. Wizard. Give me £1 million in the coffee in one, and I'll get a massive Merlin tattoo on my back.